Welcome to Canine Conversations. I am your host, Robert Cabral, and today we're going to dedicate the entire podcast to puppies. I think puppies are such an important aspect of dog ownership that people don't look at and don't look at the responsibility that's really required to have a puppy. Take my headphones off. I always start with the headphones on, by the way, just so I can hear the sound and make sure everything is kind of copacetic. Is it copacetic? I don't even know what that word means. I say it all the time. And people say it all the time. I think people don't really know what that word means anyway. First of all, I want to tell you this podcast is brought to you by the Fi Collar. The Fi Collar is a GPS collar that works for your dog, works completely wirelessly. It's really very cool. I've been using this one on Maya for several months. I can see how many steps she takes, how much exercise she's getting, where she's going. I can see a plot map of exactly where she is. If she leaves the home zone, which I've set to be my house and my yard, I get an alert immediately on my smartphone. And then I can track on my smartphone where she is, whether she's with me or away from me. So try the Fi Collar, Tryfi, tryfi.com. And if you use my name, Robert Cabral, you will save $25. It's a great deal. Talking more about puppies. So the idea for owning puppies is really kind of a huge responsibility for people. And it's one I think people overlook. People just do not get how important the what you do with a puppy is in the later years of the dog. So when you get a puppy, it's a kind of a blank slate, and all the things you put upon that slate can become really positive things, good things for the dog, or they can become negative things for the dog and be almost cataclysmic things for their later years. So however they develop as puppies, and they are socialized with lots of people and love their animals and sights and sounds and smells and textures and places and all these different things. This puppy will then end up being a really well-balanced dog. That is based on the fact that it has good genetics and good rearing from the mom. That's a component that people don't look at, is that the genetics of the dog. I was talking to some breeders over the last couple of weekends at the dog shows, and they were telling me how sometimes they get these dogs that have aggression issues. And as soon as they see that aggression issues, they neuter the dog because they don't want that gene pool to go further. Backyard breeders, puppy mills, a lot of people breeding on Craigslist, a lot of them are backyard breeders. Maybe there's a good breeder on. I would not imagine it, but I'm not going to get into this. I got into that the other week with somebody. The genetics of the dog are so important to these people that they want to preserve it. They want a solid temperament. They want a good conformation. They want good health. They do health checks and all these checks on the dog to make sure that they're going to foster better and better dogs as the years and the lines and the lineage of the dog goes on. Puppies are incredibly impressionable. And whatever happens to the puppy, it can be a really good thing or a really bad thing. So if a puppy is not exposed to other dogs or cats or children are a huge component. So a really good breeder or rescue person will make sure that a puppy in that 5-week window or so will be handled by children, will hear children, will have children around, and that will make the dog very neutral to children. It doesn't have to like children, and it shouldn't hate children. But if the dog has never seen a young child, and I mean a child 3, 4, 5, 6 years old, then as it grows up and grows into being a dog, it will then have a suspicion of that. And children move very differently. They sound differently. They smell differently. The dog will then become very curious to that. It may chase it. It may growl at it because it doesn't know it. People always think that if a dog is suspicious to something, that it was abused. So, oh my God, my dog hates the vacuum cleaner. I know the people before me hit him with the vacuum cleaner or teased him with the vacuum cleaner. But that's not true. The dog was probably never exposed to a vacuum cleaner, and that non-exposure, that non-event for the dog leads the dog to be suspicious to it, because what I'm talking about here is how important these exposures and these imprints are on the puppy for the later years when the puppy becomes a dog. So the puppy that's exposed to a lot of sounds, a lot of things. For example, puppies that are raised on farms oftentimes have a hard time with cars because they don't see as many cars. They don't see the movement, the sound, and the experience of that. while they're very, very young puppies. And if they don't have that, they don't see it, it becomes very spooky to them. When I got Goofy, he was very spooked out by bicycles. So we would go down to PCH where there's a lot of bicycles and sit there on Saturdays and Sundays, and I would feed him his kibble, one kibble at a time, around the bicycles. Eventually, he could care less about the bicycles. We worked through several issues with him. Flags, like banners and balloons and bicycles and shopping carts. All these things were things that he probably wasn't exposed to early on, so I needed to expose him to those things at that 8, 9, 10-week window. And it was a really, really good thing because now Goofy is really solid around those environments, and it makes him a much better dog. But people often get puppies and don't know that. They think, oh, the puppy's just going to be great. The puppy's going to be in the house. The puppy's going to have a great time. And then the puppy has problems. The problems then become more and more cemented in the dog's mind as the dog gets older because there's no information there. It's not a positive experience. So something happens, the dog gets pulled away or puppy gets pulled away from those experiences and they don't see it again. In other words, they never have the opportunity to know that the experience that they experienced isn't a negative experience. When it's a young puppies, like young children, they're brave. They're so courageous and stupid that they don't have the sense to be afraid of it yet. So they experience it, they think it's great, and they let it go. For example, like if children are handling puppies and the children are good at handling puppies, they're very solid with puppies, then the puppy will think, well, children are normal. They held me before. I've had that experience. They may not think it, but it's hardwired in, and they're not going to have a problem with children. If a puppy never saw a child and then suddenly you bring it home and you've got 3-year-olds running around the house screaming, it's going to flip out the puppy. That also comes into play depending on the dog. If the dog is a very high drive dog, especially a prey driven dog and a herding dog, it can be a lot more problematic with little children running around, cats and stuff like that, because it's their nature to chase things, and that's where you're going to end up running into your problems. So, also the things you don't solve with puppies are things that are going to be left unsolved with dogs. So if a puppy is showing aggression or frustration, or is just being very dominant in the way it's interacting, biting, play biting, or anything like that, then the dog will have those characteristics as a dog, and then it can be a lot worse. A friend of mine has got a bulldog where as a puppy, I don't really know what he did with the puppy, but it was a singleton, which is the only one left in the litter, or an only child. And those dogs are always problematic. And the dog is now, like having resource issues with food, and we're going to work on that. Dogs need to be around other dogs, especially at an early age. And that's something that we kind of overlook. I had a friend of mine who had a pit bull that she rescued years and years ago. And the dog was a complete disaster because it was raised by a person. It was never raised by another dog. And people are so much different with a dog than a dog would be. And therefore they accept behavior. It's like a mother is very strong and relentless with the puppy. They're very, very in the puppy's face. They correct the puppy. They move the puppy. They do whatever. Where humans are always going to coddle the dog and hold the dog and do all these things where the dog feels, okay, I can't do anything wrong. I've never gotten corrected. And then they don't know how to handle that. Singletons, only children, only puppies, have the issue that they never get around other dogs, so they don't have the interaction. It's like only children. If they don't ever get to a nursery school early on, they end up being spoiled and entitled and brats. So same thing with puppies. So puppies, it's critical that puppies have solid exposure, good exposure. And if you're going to get a puppy, or if you want to get a dog and you're getting a puppy, if you don't have the time for it, please don't get a puppy. Puppies need a lot of experience, and they need a lot of exposure. So there should be somebody in the house most of the day for the puppy. There should be somebody who's going to work with the puppy, give the puppy structure, expose the puppy to lots of things. And if you can't do that, just get an older dog, because it'll be a lot easier for you, and you're not going to end up messing up a puppy. So I want to dedicate a primary portion of this podcast to questions and answers, because I get so many, and these are all dedicated to puppies. First one goes out to Popular Coco, who says, what can I do if my 4-year-old pit mix is aggressive to other dogs? She will growl at our puppy and our other dogs when they get too close when she's laying down. She's territorial in my bed. Well, if you have your 4-year-old pit mix is aggressive to other dogs, don't bring a puppy home. I mean, that's just stupid. That's really, really stupid. Because especially a pit bull is going to have issues of issues with other dogs anyway. And people say, no, pit bulls are friendly. They never have issues with other dogs. Don't really know the dogs. Yeah, I'm the guy who took 10, 15 pit bulls in the yard at the city shelters here in Los Angeles and had them play because I could structure it. But I can tell you that most of the behavioral issues, if there's a pit bull involved, it's going to be dog aggression. So it's a really bad idea. I don't know why you get a puppy if you have a pit bull that's aggressive to other dogs. It's just stupid. You're going to need to, I would probably, get rid of the puppy. I'd rehome the puppy because you're going to, if he's growling at your puppy, if she's growling at your puppy and your puppy's getting in the dog's face, you're going to have a problem and it's going to be really ugly. So no, don't do that. If you have by the way, everybody, if you have a dog that's dominant or aggressive, don't bring a puppy into the home until your other dog is gone. D Crazy Gaming says, good advice. I bought a slip lead recently for my German Shepherd puppy, but I must be doing something wrong because he still pulls like a butt or like a bull. A video explaining how to use it would be appreciated. Well, I've got videos on how to do leash training. I've got videos on how to do prong collars and leash pressure and all these things. You need to watch them. The important thing to realize is that none of these tools, whether it's a remote e-collar, whether it's a prong collar, whether it's a slip lead or anything, none of these tools are a magic bullet. None of them are push button and like remote control. They just work. None of them. None of it. It doesn't happen. You must learn how to use the tool and then find the tool that works the best for you. That's how this whole game works, right? You find the tool that works for you. I like e-collars. I like prong collars. I like tons of tools. I'm very adept at using many tools, but I'll find clients. Some are better with an e-collar, some are better with a prong collar, some are better with a choke chain, some are better with a martingale, slip leads. It depends, but you need to learn to use the tool. It will not use itself. Christina says, how do you go about teaching puppies to not bite or nip at the heels? All puppies bite and nip at the heels, especially herding breeds. I've watched as many videos as I can find, and most are from positive-only trainers, and would like to hear your method. The reason positive-only trainers put so many videos out there is because they're not solving problems. They're just making videos and criticizing balanced trainers. I'm getting an Australian cattle dog in a few weeks, and I'm very aware that they nip. Yes, they do. It's not a huge problem since I'm not living with any children. I plan on doing agility, nose work, and trick training with him, not competitively. I'm going to a few puppy classes, mostly to socialize him with other puppies. So this is fantastic, right? You're doing all the right things. And all these things like doing agility and going to puppy classes and nose work and all these things are going to give the dog a job to do so that the dog is not nipping and acting stupid. Puppies generally will nip when they're bored or when they want attention. So if you can keep the dog occupied, crate train the dog, put the dog in the crate with a Kong, with some turkey necks, with some frozen bananas and all these different things that the dog can chew on. When the dog comes out, the dog should be interacting with you, doing some training, going for a walk, doing some luring and shaping and free shaping. And then the dog is not going to have time to do that. When the training is over, let the dog kind of chill out back in the crate, and the dog will be less likely. Remember, there's always going to be a certain degree of mouthing, teething, or nipping, biting. That's just the nature of the dog. But you will minimize it because you're already saying you're going to do all these positive things like training the dog in all these different sports. Fantastic. I think you're going to have a great dog, and your dog's going to be very happy with you. Raquel says, hey, I have a 10-month-old Shepherd mix, not sure if German or Malinois type, that I adopted at 6 months from the shelter. I do my best to exercise her every day and use balanced training methods. Kudos to you. Very good. So far, she's doing very well. Recently, took her to Home Depot to do some more socializing, and she's a very well-behaved pup overall. I've taken her on some puppy play dates, and she does very well off-leash, although she is shy at first. However, I still can't get her to calm down when she sees other dogs while on a leash. There are occasions when she doesn't react. Okay, yada, yada, yada. I think a prong collar would work best, but since I'm training myself, I don't want to risk misusing it. Or would you recommend as long as I do my research? Well, so if you watch my prong collar videos, whether it's on YouTube or my membership section, you'll see how to use the prong collar. And if the dog is 10 months old, I think it's a really good tool. I think it would be, if you introduce it fairly, I think you're going to have a really nice time with the dog, and you'll teach her that. Now, the more the dog learns to play with other dogs, in other words, the more time you spend with the dog at dog parks and socializing and play groups and stuff like that, the more the dog is going to want to do that when it sees other dogs. In other words, when my dog sees another dog, they don't get to play with other dogs. My dogs play with my dogs, not with strange dogs, not with dogs off the street, not with dogs in the park, never. So I can have my dog off leash at the park, training under complete control. And if another dog is running around, my dog stays focused on me because that's all the dog has ever known. The more you let the dog interact, the less the dog is going to interact with you, the more the dog interacts with other dogs or people. So keep your dog really focused on you. He's your dog. You got him. Make sure the dog is trained and focused on you. The prong collar, I think, is a great idea. I would, watch my videos, introduce it slowly. I think you'll have a great time with it. John says, getting a new puppy at the end of January, and I wonder if you have any videos on introducing a puppy into a household with older dogs. New puppy is a male golden retriever at 8 weeks, and the current dogs are both female, 11 years old and well-trained. Looking for a smooth introduction. So first of all, you're probably going to have an easy introduction because you've got well-trained females. They're older. You just want to make sure that the puppy doesn't get into the face of the other dogs too much. And the way you can do that is put the dog in a crate, the puppy. And the more you can keep the puppy in the crate until he sees that the females, the older dogs, are in control, and that the females see that he's a puppy and he's restricted, it's going to make it super, super easy on you. The more you do that, the better it is for the dogs, your older dogs, because you don't want them to feel suddenly overwhelmed as little young puppies coming in and pushing them around and grabbing them and nipping their ears and grabbing their fur and all that stuff. It's just not fair to the dogs. Excuse me. But crate training is going to be a big help. Keeping the puppy away from the other dogs, showing the dog he can't just go running up to him. The more you correct the puppy for doing those things, the less your other dogs are going to do it. But generally females, I don't know if you've ever, if any of them has ever had a litter of puppies, but they generally will be very, very good with a puppy. As long as use a crate, slow introductions, Dwayne Mater wasn't allowed to run free with Goofy and Maya for, a few weeks. And then it was still all supervised. So that's the safest way to do it. That's the way I do it with my dogs, because I think the way you introduce them is the way it's going to be in the long run. And if you look at now all the videos you see of Dwayne and Goofy, they just play and play and play and play and play, and then they settle down. They'll settle down more when it's just me around, and if it's Janet and I around, then they kind of they kind of try to see if they can get Janet's attention, because they truly love Janet, and they want to kind of play more and show off more to her, where with me they kind of just want to settle down because they know I don't really take well to that. I like dogs to be settled down unless I'm working them. So the more you give them that structure, the better the life of the dogs are going to be. Next question goes out to Kelly, who says, we recently adopted a Belgian Malinois puppy. She has been free roaming around the house for a few weeks. I don't know why you would do that with a puppy, Belgian Malinois especially. How do I suddenly start limiting her to the crate and still have it be a good experience for her to be in the crate? Should have done it early on. I just can't imagine a scenario where she would be content to stay in there without scratching and barking. You're setting yourself up for a failure. You're making every excuse to not train this dog, especially when my children play around the house. This usually gets her excited to want to run and play too. However, if doable, this would be super helpful to us as she is yet to be house trained. So you've got a puppy, you've had it for several weeks, you let it run around the house with your kids running around, playing crazy. You've got a high drive puppy that's peeing and pooping in your house because you don't have it house trained, and now suddenly you want to crate it. I think you've done yourself and your puppy a huge disservice because you haven't given the dog structure. Puppies need structure. The very, very first thing with any puppy is to confinement train them, to train them to be in a small, certain area. Letting a puppy run free in the house is like letting your kid crawl around on Fifth Avenue in New York and not paying attention to it. It's absolutely insane. So what you can do is start feeding the puppy in the crate. The food goes in the crate, and the crate is in another room. Don't let your kids run around the crate because it's going to make the puppy crazy. Be fair to your puppy. I mean, you've done something responsible. You've raised children. Be responsible and raise this puppy with the same fairness that you put to your children, because otherwise it's complete bull. You're going to end up ruining this puppy, and it's a Belgian Malinois. It's going to end up nipping and biting and being dominant and doing all these crazy things because you're not giving the dog structure. I don't know where you got this puppy. I don't know who the breeder was of this puppy, but they should have asked you these questions, and they should have told you this, point blank. And more than likely you got the dog from a backyard breeder or Craigslist or something where they don't care, and they don't give you the information. So a responsible breeder would have told you this, would have asked you to get into training, would have told you about crate training the dog, and all these things. And you say you end it with any advice. Yeah, my advice is hunker down, watch my videos, learn what I'm talking about. There's 1,000 videos of mine on YouTube. Learn from those videos what you need to do. I talk about structure all the time, all the time. You must structure this dog or you're going to end up getting rid of the dog. Mark says, my walks with my 16-week-old puppy are going extremely well with his prong collar. However, like a horse nearing his barn, he seems to sense when we're heading home and starts to pull harder and harder to the point where that martingale portion of the prong collar closes right up. So let me tell you something. First of all, if that martingale portion of the prong collar closes up, the dog is choking themselves and is being stabbed by these prongs. So the prong is designed to bite and release, right? So that means it's a pop and a release. Please watch my video on leash pressure for prong collars, because if you haven't watched that yet, you're not using the prong collar right. The dog should never, ever be pulling into the prong. It's completely, again, I don't care if it's a prong collar, a martingale, flat collar, whatever, you're crushing the dog's neck, and it's not fair to the dog. And the dog is probably just trying to get away from you because he's feeling this pressure. Do a couple things. One, feed the dog his meal when you get to the end of your walk. In other words, don't bring him home and feed him. And I don't know if you feed him before you go or whatever, but I would have an event. I would take, like let's say you're going to walk 3 blocks. At the end of a block and a half, put the food down, feed him, have a little party with him, and then walk back. If it's too exciting to get home, if he gets all his love and affection at home, if he gets his food at home, his toys and all that at home, then he's going to want to get back home because that's the most exciting part of his walk. Don't have that be the case. Be dead at home. Be completely boring at home. Have being at home with him be a non-event to the dog, and you're going to have a lot better time for him to understand how to enjoy the walk. Going out should be the most exciting thing for the dog. Go out, play with him, train him, give him treats, give him some food at the end of the walk, and then bring him home. When you get home, unhook the leash, walk away, and don't pay any attention to the dog. And that'll make the walk more of an event, and the dog will be happier on the walk. Okay. I think I missed something here. All right, let me see here. I get so turned around on these things. Okay, here. I missed one here. Hakon says, we're getting a new puppy soon. I'll be taking the lead in training, but I do want to make sure the dog will respond to my daughters and wife as well. Well, that's not going to happen. Right? Everybody wants to be, I want my dog to listen to everybody. Well, he's not going to do that. The reason the dog listens to a person is because of respect. And respect is what wins out in dogs overall. The dog is going to listen to whoever he respects or fears the most. That's just the way it is. Now, if it's respect, it's a much better relationship. If it's fear, the dog will make a choice to either listen to the person or try to get away from them. That's not what you want. So what my suggestion to you is I don't know who's taking the lead in the training. I don't know what your home situation is. If your wife works at home or stays at home and you work out, or you stay at home and your wife, I don't know. But whoever's at home around the dog the most, whoever's going to feed the dog the most, walk the dog the most, interact with the dog the most, is generally the person the dog will listen to and bond to the strongest. Let your kids just be kids. They don't need to train the dog. The dog doesn't need to listen to them. They're not going to do anything. If it's a really nice little dog and you want to have your kids walking the dog and giving him treats and feeding him once in a while, that's fine. But you should take the lead in training the dog. Your wife should take the lead in building the structure around feeding times, making the dog sit and wait before she feeds him, all those kind of things. Other than that, just have fun with the dog. Watch my videos. You'll learn what to do. But let go of this idea that the dog needs to listen to every single person in the family. And, if you get some crazy e-collar trainer, they're going to have everybody using the e-collar on the dog and shocking the dog to get the dog to listen. I wouldn't do it. Tori says, what is the best age for a puppy to start training them? Right away. The old adage of wait till the dog's a year old so the dog's body structure can handle the pressure. There's no pressure on training. Early on with puppies, we don't use compulsion on puppies. We lure and shape behaviors. And that luring and shaping is something that's super fun for the dog. We teach the dog the biomechanics of movement, of down, of sit, of stand, of come, of go to your place, of leave, whatever it is. You're teaching the dog just basic biomechanics. That will get the dog to understand those things. So later, when you tag a word to them or a command to them, then they can understand them better and do them better. But for the first few weeks, just shape it. Just put the dog on a table and teach them to, from a down to a stand, to a sit, to a stand, to a down. Teach them to follow you, to come. Teach them some turning movements, go between your legs, and all that stuff. That's all stuff you should do when the puppy right away. Don't right away teach the dog sit, down, stay, all that stuff. Just let the dog learn natural movements, and from there, tag words to them, tag behaviors onto the actions, and then you'll have a dog that's going to really just enjoy training because it was all lured and shaped, and it's all things they can do. I mean, from the time they're 6-7 weeks old already. Ajay says, my puppy is 6 months old and she has growth plate issues. Her left leg is a little bit angular near the paws. She limps. I consulted a vet and he gave some medicine for bone growth. Is there any other treatment? Treatment, I can't give you any because I'm not a veterinarian, but training-wise, I would treat her like a normal dog, but I would not do overly exerting movements like running, jumping, or too much exercise, and ask your vet what the dog can handle. As far as treatment goes, that's going to be something that a vet can tell you better. You might want to ask another specialist. I would also consult an orthopedist, which more than likely your doctor is an orthopedist if he's giving you these medicines. But ask him what can the dog do, what will be the limitations of the dog, and if the dog has severe movement limitations, then you're going to just have to respect that and just have a dog that's going to just chill out with you and have a really nice life like that. Okay, let me see here. This is kind of a long one here. Should my dogs be litter trained? Well, that's basically the gist of this question, right? Should my dogs be litter trained? And I'll tell you, and I know you go on, you say you live in this sub-zero temperature, yada, yada. It's kind of a long-winded thing. First of all, wherever you live, you should get a dog that's conducive to that environment. If you live in a very cold temperature, don't get a dog that's not conducive to cold temperatures. If you live in a very hot climate, don't get a dog that's not conducive to hot climates. That's something you've got to ask yourself and you've got to be responsible enough for. The different breeds and the different groups of dogs are going to be more, I should say the breeds specifically within the groups will be more conducive to certain climates. There'll be dogs that do really well in warm temperatures and dogs that do really well in cold temperatures. Every dog can do well in a temperature that is suited for it. If you've got a dog that's outside of the temperature zone that's good for the dog, like you got a St. Bernard and you live in Florida, well, then you made a really bad mistake because the dog is going to suffer in the heat. You have to get the dog that's right for your environment. Now, I don't like litter training dogs because then they're going to end up peeing and pooing in the house for their whole lives. I think it's a really weird habit. You say your dog limps in the snow and does all this. Well, you might have to find an area of your property that you can kind of shovel out. You might have to go out there early and shovel it so your dogs can go out. But you've got to take this responsibility. And first of all, see why the dog is limping. I don't understand why a dog would limp going out if it's cold, because chances are a dog's feet can handle that unless there's something wrong with the dog's feet. I don't know. Again, that's something I would ask a veterinarian about. But you're asking my opinion on litter training. I don't like litter training dogs. I mean, some people, some breeders will litter train puppies so that they go in a big thing. But as soon as they get to the home, I highly, highly, highly suggest that you get them, outside housebroken, crate train them, get them out, in, out. And with your dogs too, you might consider putting them in a crate so that when it's time to go out, bam, it's time to go out, and that's it. You got to go out and you've got to do what you got to do. So anyway, that's it for my questions this week. This was the puppy episode of the podcast. I'm going to have some guests on the podcast in the future, but here and there, I'm going to just try to power through, answer questions because I get so many questions for you guys. I want to make sure I get to them. You guys are very important to me. Thank you for following me on YouTube, on Facebook, on Instagram. Thank you for your very important questions. I applaud you for asking them because there are no stupid questions. Sometimes I might be a little bit sarcastic, but you got to hunker down. I got to make you responsible and being a good, responsible dog owner. That's really, really important. Again, this podcast was brought to you by the Fi collar, which is right here, the Fi collar. The Fi collar is a GPS collar. This is actually Maya's collar that I myself use. I like it. It notifies you on your smartphone when your dog leaves a certain safe zone. It tells you how many steps the dog takes. It tells you exactly where your dog is, whether the dog is with you or not. You can follow and see where your dog is walking. It works. I've used it for the last few months. I really like it. By the way, if you want to get your own Fi collar, which I recommend you do, you can use my name, Robert Cabral, in the discount code, and you will save $25. So tryfi, TRYFI.com, tryfi.com, the GPS collar that I use. This is Maya's collar, and I hope you'll use it to keep your dog safe. Thanks, and I'll see you next week.